I don't see why not. Meaning, if Hamas said something like, we are Islamists, all we care about is a traditional Palestinian state following Shia law. Let's say they made that case. We're not secular terrorists like the PLO, because the PLO were secular terrorists. That's factual, correct? They say we are a religious alternative. Please support us. It would make sense to support Hamas. Now, the fact that it was a bait and switch, the fact that it was a lie, of course, they didn't know at that point. But I just want to give you an analogy. The Muslim Brotherhood was allowed to exist in many Arab countries because it was like having a, I forget what, in the Catholic Church, there's a layperson organization of very strict Catholics. So Muslim Brotherhood were Muslims, but more intense and tolerated until they got political. And then Syria went to war against their Muslim Brotherhood. So did Egypt. There was a Muslim Brotherhood takeover of Egypt, as you may remember, and al-Sisi came in and committed a coup against them. So the issue of are there devoted Muslims that have no political aspirations? Yes. Have there been groups of devoted Muslims with no political aspirations? Yes. Have they then turned political and attacked? Yes. So now I'm going to ask you, why do people bring that question up? Are they really that interested in the history of modern devotional Islamic groups? What people say is, now this is the full question. They heard something was up, let's say that week. Netanyahu talks to the chief of staff of the Israeli army. This is documented. He talked to the head of Israeli military intelligence. He talked to their FBI, the General Security Services. He talks to the Mossad and says, do I need to be worried about that? He talks to all of his security professionals, and they say, from the article that I read, En da'aga, nothing to worry about. So I say to people, what did you want Netanyahu to do? To ignore the recommendations of his professional military and intelligence services and personally call up the reserves? I don't even know if he has the authority to do that. I don't know if he actually can do that. Now, if you're used to blaming Netanyahu for everything, you just added on the list of things to blame Netanyahu. So when someone says that to me, I say, what is your point? Well, Netanyahu's to blame. So Netanyahu's bad. Yeah, he's bad. I said, ever said that before? Yeah. How long have you been saying it? 20 years. I said, okay. Why would you say anything different? Now, I'm not against or for Netanyahu. I just look at policies. There's some Netanyahu policies I don't like, others that I do like. So I don't say Netanyahu as if his very name spoils the goods. I look at what people are talking about. And has it ever happened where the military and intelligence services of a government tell the head of government nothing to worry about, and they were terribly wrong, and the country suffered terribly afterwards? Has that ever happened in our history? Yes. Most notably, Pearl Harbor and 9/11. And in the investigations that happened afterwards, there was a systemic, what I'm going to call, peace fever. It can't happen. The American military said, Japanese would never dare attack Pearl Harbor. We had a system in place ever since the years right after the Nixon years. I'll say the Carter years, of defanging the connection between the CIA and the FBI and the FISA court. It was set up to protect accused people, not to maximize America's ability to protect itself. If you haven't read the 9/11 report, please read it, because you will see 9/11 happened because of a systemic failure of our intelligence services that was created on purpose to create that state of affairs. So I don't blame Carter. I'm not going to blame Reagan. I'm not going to blame Bush. I'm not going to blame Clinton. I'm not going to blame Bush number 2. I'm not going to blame any of them. It was America. We did it. Those were our representatives. So the peace fever in Israel was from top to bottom, side to side, everywhere. So if you want to blame anybody, blame the citizens of the state of Israel. Okay? So I want you all to try this. Call somebody in Israel and say, you know those butchered babies, those beheaded babies, those massacred people, those families who put their hands up and were massacred anyway, people shot in their bed, say, it's your fault. Are you going to do that? I think it's disgusting to just throw out whose fault it is. You know whose fault it is? It's the fault of Hamas. That's whose fault it is. Don't ever let that leave your mind. Hamas did it. Why wasn't Israel ready? Systemic failure, bottom to top, top to bottom, side to side. If anybody finds out anything dramatically different, for example, the head of Israeli military intelligence, the chief of staff of the army, the head of security service, the Mossad said, hey, Netanyahu, better mobilize the troops, attack's coming. And now it says, nah, I'm taking Saturday off. If you can find that, tell me. But you're not going to find it because it was a systemic failure. So in my opinion, people use this like vultures. They use these tragedies and atrocities to further a political agenda. And there's one reason why you may know that I hardly ever talk about an event the day after, because the day after a tragedy, the vultures are out pushing their agendas before the bodies are even buried. I find it so unseemly. I find it disgusting. I find it an affront to the decency of human beings. Every single time there's a tragedy, somebody wants to score political points. I swear I will never do it. They say, Rabbi Finley, why are you quiet? I say, I got away today. I got to hear everything and understand what happened, and I'm not going to try to score points for whatever my political agenda is over those dead bodies. Now, for people who say Netanyahu, I don't say it. I'm saying it to you. So this is one to any other. There are some people here who might have said it to me, but I'm not saying it back to you personally. I'm just saying to everybody here, don't say that to me. Our hearts are too broken. We look at those pictures of those kids, and you look at the pictures of those kids and those beheaded babies and the massacred people, and you say, Netanyahu. Folks, it's too hard. It's too hard. There's going to be an investigation right now. Let's defend the borders and console the bereaved and bury the dead. That's my perspective. There is no vision. We don't know what's going to happen next. We don't know what the world's going to do next. If we actually get rid of these guys and demilitarize Gaza to our satisfaction, Qatar might come in and says, okay, we'll come in now and we will build a little paradise on the Eastern Mediterranean with a marina. I don't know what's going to happen, but the question is, remember, nobody wants to give money to a region that's infested with crime and terrorists. So what if Israel can say, they're done, they're dead, they're exiled, we got every single one of them. And the minute one rocket gets launched, there's going to be 1,000 soldiers in a minute on that spot. And they say, okay, no more rockets, we're done. Tap, uncle, like Germany did. What happened after Germany? What happened after Germany surrendered? What happened after Japan surrendered? Those that were said, Germany has to be plowed under and only be allowed to create an agricultural country. Morgenthau said that. It's not what happened. Once the Imperial Japanese army was destroyed, McCarthy came in and built an ideal liberal democracy with strong unions that became very productive. That's what the Americans did because they surrendered. It's because they surrendered. If they truly surrender, in my opinion, if they truly surrender and say we're done, Israel and the world will act like America did with Germany and Japan, and we will build it into a sparkling city of productivity and goodness. That's possible because I've seen it before. We've done this before. They have to surrender, though. No. And I'll tell you why. I've studied the last 3 months of the battles in Germany. I've read more books than you can care to imagine. Why the Germans didn't rise up? Because the SS was there. And the SS was on a murder spree until May 7th, 1945, when they surrendered. Now, this is hard to imagine. The SS was going through Germany, and anybody who said anything untoward, they were shot. If a soldier says, I think we're losing, they were strung up on a street pole. If a soldier had on the retreat from the Soviet Union, and they stopped at a Hungarian orchard and picked an apple, that was called looting the Führer's property strung up. You have no idea what the SS was and what they did to Germany, what they did to German soldiers and German people. So think of this Hamas army. It's an SS militia that will execute its people at a whim if things get bad. So do I think the Palestinians will rise up? They will be massacred by the Hamas SS if they rise up. I don't think there's a possibility. I could be mistaken. I've been asked my opinion, what I know from history, but what I know from history is no guarantee of what's in the future. It could happen. I hope it happens. I taught this for years at USC, so I'll try to give the most brief possible. First of all, there's a strong residue from the New Testament. If you look in John chapter 8, other places, the Jews are blamed for the crucifixion of Christ, and therefore are eternally tainted with the sin of killing God. That comes right out of early Christianity. And unfortunately, there's been waves of Christianity where that's taken more or less seriously. The economic position of the Jew, because Jews were not allowed to own farms and land and so forth, they went into the classic place of the moneylender, which is true in many countries. When the government needs someone to take taxes from the peasants, they bring in an outside ethnic group who's living in the land. So who are the tax collectors in Vietnam? The Chinese. Who are the tax collectors in China? The Vietnamese. So they always pick an outside ethnic group to be the tax collector. So there's just a couple. So Christ killers, John calls the Jews in John chapter 8 children of Satan. That doesn't wear off. You know, once you're taught in Sunday school for your entire life that Jews are the children of Satan, when you need to look at for someone satanic, you got them right down the street. Now, I gave many lectures on this. I won't say any more than that, but if we want to do a history of Jewish hatred, I'm willing to do it. The last turn was in the what's called the scientific racism at the end of the 20th century, where they were trying to justify the racism, ethnic racism, religious racism on a scientific level. The Jew was scientifically proven to be an evil cancer on society by German scientists. And so it went from killers of Christ, leeches, looters, and scientifically proven to be cancerous to society. So, I mean, it's horrible. I taught it for 10 years and couldn't teach it anymore. Miroslav knows. I used to start this and end up with the movies, and it scarred my soul. And I said to Miroslav, I can't do this anymore. It's killing me. It really was killing my soul. I can't get those images out of my head. I have to say to you, just personally, when I would go down to the synagogue and I see a group in front of me, from my 10 years of teaching Holocaust, I say they would have killed you and you and you and you and those little kids. They would have come in here, locked us in here, burned us all alive, and gone down the street to the next one. I can't get those thoughts out of my head. Too much, studying the Holocaust too much. I taught well. I taught well. I helped a lot of kids understand. And I hope that none of my students whom I taught would ever dare take a stand in one of those protests. No, the corridor takes them from northern Gaza to southern Gaza. Okay. There's a corridor that they've set out. You go down that corridor, we won't hurt you, but get out now. When you look at Amnesty International, this is obviously not Amnesty, right? It's something like social justice. Okay. Yeah. Have they given reports on North Korea?
I didn't look it up.
Look at Amnesty International and North Korea, which is objectively the worst human rights violator on the planet for its entire existence. Look at human rights in China, which of course is a fascist state with no free press, no freedom of ideas, no freedom of speech. And look at the Amnesty International report on China. And I want you to tell me what it says. And then I'd like you to the one on Russia. And we know what's going on there. Cuba is the greatest violation of human rights in the Western Hemisphere and has been this way since 1959. Atrocious violation of human rights. Venezuela as well. And when you look at all these human rights violators, And the number of people violated, for example, China, we're talking about 1 billion people, North Korea in the tens of millions. Look at all of them and all the offenses. And which country in the world, by far, exponentially has the most human rights violations of any country in the world? Israel. Okay? And you can say it to your kid, yeah, bring the report out. Where's China? Where's North Korea? Where's Russia? Where's Cuba? Why Israel? Don't tell them, say, why do you think it is that of all of the human rights violations all over the world, one country is singled out? Why do you think they say, I don't know. Why do you think? Okay, here's the second question. Israel is on the West Bank. I've been through there. It is not a kind occupation. But remember, why is there an occupation? Because they won't recognize the state of Israel to exist behind safe borders. They've been committing terrorism against Israel since 1948, and they don't stop. Look at this lion's den hiding in the tunnels under Jenin. They keep going out and trying to kill Israelis. Israelis are better soldiers, so 10 of them died to every Israeli. And they say, 200 Palestinians died. 200 young men who intended to murder Jews died. Okay, you always got to clarify that. 200 Palestinians, what were their gender? What was their age? Where were they when they got killed? Fighting Israeli soldiers. And why did the soldiers go in? Because they had just killed someone on the streets of Jerusalem. See the context? Now, you don't tell your child that. Say, 200, what exactly are the violations? Do you remember one violation? I'm not saying there aren't. I saw a violation with my own eyes. Mirav and I are in a line of cars getting from Palestine into Israel on our way from Hebron to Jerusalem to Hebron to Beersheba. So I look at the car in front of me, and the soldiers, there's Arab guys get in the car, and they look inside, and they take big blunt instruments, sledgehammers, hammers, and so forth. They just toss them onto the road. I thought, man, that's messed up. I would be so pissed if that happened to me. And then I thought to myself, I remember, I got pulled over by a cop in LA. And I had some tools behind my seat, and they said to me, we could arrest you. I said, for what? Carrying just dangerous weapons. I said, it's my tools. They said, you got to put them in your trunk. If you have a hammer or a sledgehammer available to your hand, we're supposed to arrest you. We're letting you go with a warning. Now, when I saw it happen in Israel, I thought, human rights abuse. Now, when it happened in LA, did I say human rights abuse? Did I call the local Human Rights Association? If I would have gotten arrested, was that a human rights violation? Or we don't want road rage backed up with sledgehammers. So here's what I'd like you to do. Look at every human rights violation. Look for the details on each one, not the fact they report it, but the context in which it happened. Okay, that's my challenge to you. Now, I'm not saying there aren't some Israeli soldiers who are not good people and rough Palestinians up. It happens everywhere. These are 18, 19-year-old kids that are put under terrible stress. And they react. By and large, it's the most moral army in the world. You know what reason I say that? Have you seen the pictures of the Hamas terrorists captured? Dozens and dozens, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I saw a caption that says, why are you capturing these people? Meaning, if 10 of them raise their hand, why doesn't the Israeli soldier mow them down like Hamas did with Israeli civilians? You know why Israel just does mow them down out of revenge and bloodlust? Why? Because they're Israeli. Because they're Israeli. And when the enemy raises their hands, they raise their hands, we're done, they drop their weapon. Every single element of Israeli culture at the cell tissue level says, don't shoot prisoners. Once they put the rifle down, put their hands up, don't shoot. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. There aren't a few rogues. In general, now, what happened when the civilians on the kibbutzim raised their hands? They were massacred and mutilated. Now, is that going to go in the Amnesty International book? I really wonder. Are those 1,000 people that were mutilated, are they going to get, every one of them get an entry in Amnesty International? Every rocket that goes over, which are clearly human rights violations, every rocket that goes over from Hamas, I want you to look it up with your child. Are the rockets from Hamas recorded as human rights violations? Every single one of them. 5,000 rockets, 5,000 violations. Now, you don't have to make points. You can say, I'm so curious, this thing called human rights violations. Country by country. When you find there's only one country which is portrayed as the most evil country in the world by the United Nations, their Human Rights Committee, chaired one year by Libya, if I'm not mistaken, which country receives the vast majority of resolutions on how horrible they are? Look it up. Go to UN Watch. UN Watch. It's a website. It's a group. Don't believe me. I'm not trying to persuade you of anything. I'm trying to persuade you to look it up. I'm trying to persuade you to think in a proportional way. So if Amnesty International is a bona fide group that cares about human justice and human rights, they should treat people fairly and equally, and if they don't, I'm suspicious. Okay, maybe they do. Maybe you say, Rabbi Finley, we looked everything up. They're 100% above board, not disproportionate. Talk about every single country. Every Hamas rocket is a violation. I'll say, I'm so happy. I suspect it differently. I'm happy you corrected. But you'll do that for me, okay? You want to walk around scared? Worry about it. We have nothing to worry about, relatively. I'm more scared of local crime than I had some Hamas operatives going down to Sherman Oaks and do something. I'm more, and the second thing, you know what? I am scared of crime. I don't want to walk into the store when there's one of these looting operations and I mistakenly get in someone's way. I don't want that. I'm avoiding department stores. When we heard this, Meirav said, "What should we do?" I said, "I think I have an old military gun collection sitting in the attic." I said, "I think I'm going to bring down a couple of guns and clean them up." Man, I don't like to be threatened. I don't like being scared. Someone threatens me, I say, "Okay, let's see what you got." So that's just one of my perversions, is the way that I think. So I think all of you, harden. Watch yourself. Everybody should learn jujitsu. Everybody should learn how to defend themselves. Go about your way. And I'd like us to have the reputation. You come after American Jews, you're going to be very sorry. I'd like us to have that reputation. Wouldn't that be great? Someone says, go after the Jews. Someone says, no, I don't think you should. Another great question, when people talk about the closure of the Gaza borders, the southern borders closed by the Egyptians. If you want to know why, ask the Egyptians. They know something you don't know. So the Egyptians know what's up in Gaza, because there used to be tunnels from Gaza into Egypt, and they were tunnels of contraband, drugs, kind of a great illegal trade. And it was going through the Sinai Peninsula, and as ungovernable as the peninsula is, it was even more ungovernable. And in general, I think what I'm going to say is true. I don't like to say it, but I've heard it enough times from non-Israelis, non-Jews. The Arab world, for all their protection of Palestinians, don't particularly like Palestinians. I don't understand that, because I haven't met a lot of Palestinians. I read about what they do, but we've met people in our neighborhood. There's a couple of local establishments that are Palestinian. I haven't met a Palestinian I don't like. That doesn't sound like a gross ethnic generalization, but I like the ones in our neighborhood. I like the ones who run the shop nearby. We were very affectionate of the Palestinians we've met in our neighborhood. But for some reason, what I've heard is the Arab world don't like Palestinians. Is that true? Somebody go look it up for me and tell me. But I've heard it enough times. So why doesn't Egypt want that corridor open? Because then they're going to have to govern these people, not just house and feed them. They'll have to govern them. And unfortunately, Gaza has been a source of smuggling of drugs and guns into Israel. By the way, there's an illegal population in Israel. They come through Egypt. They come from the Sinai Desert into Israel. Which I've often said, if Israel is so horrible to Muslims, why are Muslims risking their lives go through Egypt to get to Israel? There's something that's not fitting here for me. The League of Nations created the mandate for the British to rule Palestine. The League of Nations created the mandate for the British to take other countries in the Middle East, North Africa, and for the French. The Sykes-Picot Agreement divided up the Middle East and North Africa among the British and the French, yes. And by the way, it's led to murder and mayhem ever since. But yes, they created the mandate for the British. The British held on to the mandate, did not grant a Palestinian state. Egypt had a independence, Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. Palestinians wanted theirs. Remember, rebelled against the British for 3 years, 36 to 39. It devastated their country. So when 48 came, they were behind in many ways against the Yishuv, which was as a society was more prepared for war than Palestinian society. So, but by 1939, League of Nations was defunct. I spoke about this extensively last night. Let me just brief. Yeah, this is the most dangerous thing for Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas. Saudi Arabia normalizing with Israel, along with the other Gulf states. This is a realignment. There's an alignment of Russia, China, Iran. We can put North Korea in there as well. And then there's an alignment of the United States, Europe, and Israel, and perhaps India, and adding the what we'll call the moderate Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, Jordan, Egypt, Morocco, and others. And if this gets off, the big loser will be Iran and its two client states, Hezbollah and Hamas. So the next 100 years of world history will, in my mind, will be determined by how this works it out. Will the dominant nations of the world be Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, etc.? Or will the dominant societies in the world be United States, Europe, Israel, and perhaps India, and other countries of the British Empire, let's say Australia, New Zealand, etc.? This is a fight for world history. The fight is being fought in a proxy war, meaning Hamas could not have done this without the training and supplies of Iran technology. And when you mention Iranian technology, what you mean is Chinese technology. And you mention Chinese technology, you're talking about Russian Chinese technology. So Russia, China, Iran against these other countries. The proxy war is here. And for all the reasons that I mentioned, that Hamas attacked Israel because they want to kill Israelis, because they think Israelis are colonialists, because they wanted to create a general uprising, all those are true. Another reason is they needed to scupper the deal with Saudi Arabia because that is the most terrifying thing for that axis of eagles plans for world domination. And I mean that sincerely. China is really interested in world domination. So the fight comes here. So I'm very happy that our president understands this. But I heard that I was at 2 briefings this week with administration officials. This is the point that they were making. This is the proxy war for the next 100 years of history. We have to win. Therefore, Israel has to win. Therefore, we have to help Israel. The reason that aircraft carrier group is there, not just to show support, but also to protect the skies of Israel, just in case Iran launches a missile attack. They're fighting a United States carrier group. There's nothing more dangerous in the world than a United States aircraft carrier group. Secondly, I just have to add editorial in. I'm very happy Saddam Hussein doesn't have his hands on a couple hundred Scud rockets because they'd already be landing in Israel and things would be much tougher and there would be much more death. Iran says we're going to join in. We have an aircraft group that says don't. We have probably another aircraft carrier group coming. We probably have 1 or 2 groups nearby in the Persian Gulf. I believe we still have military forces, special forces and Marines in northern Iraq and Syria. And all eyes are on Israel right now. And people have said, that's my answer to your question. So the eyes are now on, are we going to eradicate Hamas? Because that way world history will go one way. And if we let them get away with it, world history will go another way. That's what these briefers have said and why President Biden is so focused on this. What about the Israeli soldiers? Last night people said they're going into a trap, We've spoken to many of our daughter's friends who have run down there to sign up even without being called up. They're itching to fight because now they know what's at stake. And They say, well, we used to only send in small groups because we wouldn't want too many soldiers to die. Well, we already lost 250 soldiers in one day and 1,000 civilians. So what do we do? Okay, so 1,000 of us die. Because if we don't, there's going to be thousands of civilians dying every year. That's just the mentality of soldiers. I'm here to take a bullet for a civilian, and if this is the day, this is the day. So is it dangerous? Of course it's dangerous. That's why it's called war. But I think they're going to fight in an entirely intelligent way. I think as much as possible, all of Israel is behind this and wants the job done once and finally, like the destruction of Nazism, like the destruction of Imperial Japan. They were quashed and something actually beautiful came out of it, but first it has to be destroyed. I believe that is the attitude of Israel and Israel's allies. Well, actually, I am an autodidactic specialist in neurobiology and human consciousness and so forth. And you're saying something true. Many people have a hard time with this. So it's either one group is right or the other group is right, or nobody's right. Everybody has their own truth. It's just politics. And I hear this among adolescents and other people. So the best thing we can do is when they're out of their group, when they come home, speak to them with great care and empathy. And they say, well, Israel's a colonizer and it's apartheid and Hamas has been oppressed. You say, oh, great. So you know about this stuff. I have a question for you. Now, and ask questions to which you know the answer. Say, exactly what do you mean by apartheid state? You know, the gold standard is South Africa, correct? I didn't get to it today. And then you start to look it up and in no way, shape, or form is Israel an apartheid state. Doesn't fit the description. You say, oh my God, isn't that interesting that this is apartheid? That's happening in Israel. They're not. So why do you think people use that word? Okay. Then say, there's no blockade under any definition of the word. Look up Kogat, look up the Erez Shalom, the Erez crossing and the Kerem crossing. I might have the words wrong by this point. The tons and tons of materials transferred from it. And say, so what's up with that? What do you think? And then, as I said last night, let's look at the pictures and where are they getting these pickup trucks and these motorcycles and these rifles and these RPGs and these rockets if there's a blockade? I'm just curious. So what do they tell you in the blockade class? Now, so if you sit with them empathetically and just be curious, don't try to tell them what to think. See, we have the great fortune that the truth is on our side and that morals is on our side. See, once you start asking questions and you start stripping away, you get to core values. For example, ought the Zionists have come to Palestine? So I say it was wrong for the Zionists to go to Palestine. I said, impossible to prove or know that. Maybe you're right. Therefore what? Memorize this question. Therefore what? The Zionists were wrong to go to Palestine. I agree. Therefore what? That's a great question. So have them say, what did Ben-Gvir say? I'm really, I don't like Ben-Gvir, but I should be able to quote what he said to not like him, right? Say, what did he say? And say, let's pull out our smartphones and say what exactly Ben-Gvir said. And you say, well, he's a nasty guy. Okay? And say, why is he in Netanyahu's government? Then your daughter or young person has to know what a coalition government is, what a parliamentary system is. They may have to learn what a parliamentary system is. And then say, okay, so to get a government together, you either take the Arabs or you take the Ben-Gvirs, because you got to get over 60. If you pick the Arabs, you have one problem to be part of the ruling government, including the following problem. Back when Arabs were part of the governing coalition, a report came of an Israeli soldier had been not fired in combat, but assassinated in a terror attack. Some people in the Arab faction got up and cheered. Now that might be okay with you or your young person. Say, well, we can have them or Ben-Gvir. Now you may not like Ben-Gvir and you prefer someone who cheers when an Israeli soldier is murdered. Okay, that's a moral choice. I'm not teaching moral. I'm teaching that there are morals, not what their morals should be. And then say, okay, so Ben-Gvir is a nasty guy. He's kind of Trumpy, and his mouth runs off, and he says stupid things. Say, what has he actually done? And then when you look at what he's done is, he wants to punish an Arab village because they sent terrorists out to attack a Jewish settlement, and therefore the village has to pay. Yeah, I don't believe in that. I get it. I understand. I don't agree with it. Okay, that's bad. What else has he done? He wants to create a civilian militia. When Meir Ravan in Israel, people would ridicule Ben-Gvir's militia. He wants to create militia groups in areas just in case the army can't get there in time. People laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. Guess what? The militias are back on the agenda. They're no longer called Ben-Gvir's militias, and all the opposition to it has been erased from the internet. So all the tweets, Ben-Gvir's fascist militias, is gone. And yeah, settlements should actually have their own arms and train like a kibbutz militia until the army gets there. That's back on the agenda. So there's some things that Ben-Gvir said that I find disgusting, and there are some things that he said that in hindsight were actually pretty good. I don't like him. I wish that Gantz would have gone into government with Netanyahu. The political differences between Netanyahu, Gantz, and Lapid are almost indistinguishable. If Gantz would have joined Netanyahu's coalition, Netanyahu would never have had to deal with Smotrich or Ben-Gvir. Is that clear to everybody? Now, why wouldn't Gantz and Lapid join Netanyahu's coalition so they could have a large center coalition and not have this guy Ben-Gvir there? Because they hate Netanyahu. And destabilizing Netanyahu was more important than the good of the country, which is the history of Israeli politics. They hate Netanyahu. They want him out of power. Bring this guy Smotrich in. He's going to embarrass you. You're going to lose the next election. Then Gantz, or Lapid will be prime minister. And hopefully the Likud there'll be defections into one of those two camps. When they'll be prime minister, Netanyahu will be assigned to the scrap heap of history, and everything's going to be beautiful from then on. That's their theory. Because I'm a person who believes that people should act for the good of the country, I think Gantz should have joined Netanyahu's Likud coalition, so Netanyahu wouldn't have had to bring in Ben-Gvir, because from Netanyahu's perspective, it was either Ben-Gvir or the Arab parties. Okay, now you can present that to a 20-year-old. I mean, it's going to take, you lay it all out and say, what would you have done? Say, well, I would have brought in the Arab parties. Say, okay, that's a rational choice. I would have encouraged Gantz to join Netanyahu and let go of that Netanyahu hatred. That's also possible. There are so many things. But you see, to say, I don't like Ben-Gvir, but not give the context of how Ben-Gvir got there is probably what we need to work on. I hope that's clear and helpful.